If a black man wearing an old coat walks into a luxury building in the heart of the city and is asked to leave simply because he isn't wearing a name badge, isn't speaking loudly, and isn't accompanied by anyone, who would you think he is? A stranger? A delivery guy? Or just someone unimportant? That morning, no one inside Brockwell Partners suspected that the man they had just turned away at the front desk was Isaiah Langston, the CEO of EtherSync, a tech company holding a $47 million contract that had taken nearly 7 months to negotiate. But he didn't react. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He didn't pull out a business card or flash the contract to prove who he was. He simply nodded, turned quietly, and walked out through the glass doors, while no one inside realized they had just slammed shut the door on their own future. Not long after, the collapse began, layer by layer. Longtime clients pulled out, partners panicked, the stock plummeted, and eventually the once dominant tech consulting brand faced irreversible damage. Isaiah gave no interviews. He didn't post anything on social media. He didn't respond to reporters. But what he left behind, his silence, forced the entire industry to look inward and question how often they've judged a person by appearance, by branding, by voice, or by the cut of a suit. This isn't just a story about a twist that brought a corporation to its knees. It's a sharp and sobering reminder for all of us. How many times in life have you overlooked someone? Not because they lack the ability, but because they didn't enter through the door you're used to watching? How many ideas, insights, or dreams have been dismissed simply because the person behind them didn't fit the image of success you had in mind? We live in an era where everyone is trying to be seen, to be heard, to speak up. But maybe the ones who don't need to speak are the ones who move society in silence. This is the story of Isaiah Langston, a man who didn't need power to prove power, who didn't need a voice to create impact. And if this story made you think, made you reflect on the way you've judged others, then hit like, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss the next stories where kindness, justice, and human dignity always win, even when no one sees it at first. Denver, Colorado, a gloomy Friday morning in November. The city hadn't quite woken up yet. Early raindrops slid down the windows of Brockwell Partners, a 34-story headquarters of one of the West Coast's top strategic consulting firms. From the inside, the cold white lights reflected off the marble floors, giving the grand lobby more of a laboratory feel than a place meant to welcome people. A soft wind swept in through the glass doors whenever someone entered or left, leaving behind thin trails of water on the mirror-like stone floor. 8:47 a.m. The office crowd was just starting to trickle in. Ash gray suits, navy ties, polished leather shoes, AirPods in ears, phones in hand, the unmistakable trademarks of middle-tier corporate professionals. Everyone was busy. Everyone was in a rush. No one said hello. A man entered, blending into the morning rush. He didn't attract attention at first. Nothing about him made people turn their heads. No designer suit, no branded lapel pin, no black SUV idling out front. He wore an old navy blue coat, not tattered, but clearly not new, carried a worn brown leather briefcase with a slightly crooked handle, and in his other hand, he held a plain brown pastry box, the kind used for classic donuts. His name was Isaiah Langston, 46, born on the west side of Chicago. He was the founder and CEO of EtherSync, a data logistics AI platform often referred to as the nervous system of modern freight. But today, he wasn't here to flaunt his resume. He was here to finalize a $47 million partnership deal, one that had taken nearly 8 months of negotiation and now only needed a handshake to seal. He entered the lobby, eyes calmly scanning the space. No one recognized him. No one cared to look. He walked straight toward the front desk, where a young woman with a platinum bob and dramatic eyelash extensions sat cross-legged, tapping on her phone with one earbud in. Her name tag read, Ashley. "Good morning," Isaiah said with a light, polite smile. "I have a 9 a.m. meeting with the executive board. My name is Isaiah Langston." Ashley glanced up, a glance so fast it barely counted as eye contact. She then looked at the clock behind him. 8:49. She raised her eyebrows. "What department are you with?" she asked with no real interest in the answer. "I'm here to meet the executive board. The meeting was confirmed yesterday. I'm the CEO of EtherSync. A pause. Ashley leaned back in her chair, raising one eyebrow. Ether? What now? She repeated, her tone light, like mispronouncing a foreign drink. Oh, you're a vendor? Delivery guys go around back. The loading dock's near the parking lot. Isaiah blinked. He didn't respond immediately. He wasn't angry, but he didn't smile either. Instead, he gave a slight nod. Not the kind taught in corporate etiquette training, but the kind anyone who's ever been dismissed will instantly recognize. He set the pastry box gently on the counter, squarely, carefully, as if someone more deserving might still receive it, then turned and walked straight back toward the door. No argument, no raised voice, no request to speak to a manager, no flash of a business card. Isaiah Langston, the man whose system quietly powered over 30 logistics firms across the U.S., simply walked out. At that very moment, the elevator on the left opened. A young intern with curly hair and thick glasses stepped out, cradling a stack of reports. As soon as he spotted Isaiah, he froze, eyes widening as if he'd just seen a celebrity. Mr. Langston? The intern's voice cracked with disbelief. You're early. Isaiah smiled, not breaking stride. It's fine. Just let the board know. I appreciate the invitation. The glass doors parted again. He disappeared into the damp morning breeze, his coat flaring behind him, leaving a lobby full of people who hadn't yet realized what they had just witnessed. The intern stood frozen, his brain still catching up with what had just happened. Behind him, Ashley was back on her phone, scrolling through Instagram like nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. She didn't know that her 10 thoughtless words said without malice but without care, had just cost her company more than just its reputation. You won't always recognize power when it walks in without the uniform you're used to. No badge, no entourage. Sometimes power enters quietly, holding a box of donuts and a belief in simple kindness. And you are the one who decides whether to see it or shut the door, locking away your own opportunity in the process. The Denver morning remained overcast, but Isaiah Langston didn't feel cold. Not because of the weather. He'd lived through worse things than temperature. As he walked away from the Brockwell Partners building, he didn't make a call, didn't send a text, didn't sigh or mutter. He just walked steadily, as if that slight nod of the head, when being dismissed, had long become part of his survival routine. He stopped at a quiet corner near Civic Center Square, where an old limestone bench lay hidden behind the bus stop. Sitting down, setting his briefcase beside him, Isaiah pulled out his phone. Not to check emails. He didn't need to check his schedule. Everything inside him had been wired long ago to understand. Sometimes not replying is a reply in itself. For a moment, a memory returned, sharp and vivid, like it had happened that very morning. He was 14, the first time Isaiah had been asked to leave a computer store on the north side of Chicago, just because he stood there a bit too long, staring at the display screen. The shop owner suspected he was planning to steal. No one asked his name. No one asked what he needed. They just saw the faded hoodie and peeling Airwalk sneakers, and guessed the rest. Isaiah walked away that day without turning back, but that night he made a decision. He would learn everything he could about computers, about software, about programming, not to prove the shop owner wrong, but so that one day when he walked into a store like that, no one would be able to ignore his presence again. Isaiah was born in the Austin neighborhood on Chicago's west side, a place that city planners marked as a red zone, but locals simply called home. His father was a mechanic, no degree, no contract, who fixed up drifter cars for street racers. His mother, Loretta Langston, was a night shift nurse at a local nursing home. She once told him something he never forgot. You don't have to be seen, you just have to not be extinguished. That line followed him through every step. At 16, while his friends played basketball or skipped school to hang out at Navy Pier, Isaiah pieced together a working computer from 3 broken ones the school had tossed out. The screen was cracked, the RAM mismatched, and the hard drive was half fried. But after 2 weeks, it booted. On that machine, he wrote his first line of code. Not to build a video game like other kids, but to create a work-hour tracker for his mother. The app didn't work the first time, but he wasn't discouraged. He fixed it. Then he learned more, every day, reading library books, borrowing programming manuals, downloading tech PDFs using the free Wi-Fi from the diner down the street. People said he was weird, keeps to himself, always glued to that thing. But no one knew Isaiah was building his own world, a world where he made the rules. At 19, Isaiah earned a partial scholarship to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. For most, it was a safe, practical choice. For Isaiah, it was the first time he lived somewhere with green lawns and classrooms with projectors. He didn't go to bars, didn't join a frat, didn't appear in the yearbook. Every morning, he made coffee in an electric kettle, ate an egg sandwich, and coded until the sky turned dark. At night, he worked part-time in the campus computer center, resetting passwords for locked-out students. In his sophomore year, Isaiah wrote a simple script that helped a group of friends coordinate their library shift schedules. A professor saw the code and invited him to join a research project. Isaiah declined. His reason: I want to build something that exists beyond a footnote. Graduating with honors, Isaiah didn't go to Google or Amazon, despite internship offers. Instead, he returned to Chicago, rented a small room above a laundromat, and founded EtherSync, the early version of what would later revolutionize the logistics industry. That's where he lived, worked, ate instant noodles, and jogged the same cracked sidewalk loop every day for 3 years. The original idea was simple: a scheduling and routing system for small businesses, especially those that couldn't afford expensive enterprise software. He went door to door. Many rejected him outright. Some didn't even open the door. But a frozen food delivery company in Joliet gave it a shot. They tried it, then nodded. The system worked. It cut fuel costs by 18% in 2 months. They referred him to another company, then another. And soon Isaiah hired help, bought his own servers, opened his first office, just 430 square feet, but with real wooden desks and an old push-button coffee machine. By year 6, EtherSync was cited in Illinois' independent tech review reports. In year 7, it was integrated into the fleet management systems of 3 federal distributors, optimizing over 12 million deliveries annually. Isaiah didn't do media, no television interviews, but if you asked people in the industry who was behind it, they all said the same thing: that guy in the old coat whose system never crashes. That's why Brockwell Partners came calling. They called Isaiah the man rewriting the logic of logistics. They spoke of strategic partnerships, data restructuring, long-term vision. They sent him slick presentation decks, invited him to speak at conferences. They outlined a $47 million contract as a cornerstone for the next decade. But that morning, in the marble-clad lobby lit by cold white lights, no one knew who Isaiah Langston was. No one asked his name. No one checked the appointment calendar. No one called to verify. No one noticed the donut box he carried, the same kind he often used to break the ice in executive meetings. They only saw a black man in an old coat. And they decided he didn't belong. Isaiah wasn't shocked. He wasn't even surprised. But he remembered, because he knew, in a world where people trust a LinkedIn profile more than character, silence can be a weapon, when timed just right. And that moment was almost here. The metal table felt cold under Isaiah's palms as he sat outside a sandwich shop at the corner of Lincoln and 17th. No one paid him any attention. No eyes turned toward the man checking his phone in a soft drizzle, his sleeves still damp, his gaze as still as a windless lake. Isaiah sat upright, every fiber in his body holding back something. Not anger, not bitterness, certainty. The kind born from being underestimated too many times until one more dismissal no longer stings. But this time, there was a difference. This time he had a choice. Every battle starts with a reason. For Isaiah, that reason didn't come from rage. It came from the opposite: silence. He had quietly integrated his technology into the national freight network, quietly helped millions of packages arrive on time, quietly optimized routes others hadn't even imagined. He had never broken a contract, never raised his voice in a meeting. But just like today, he knew. Sometimes what brings a skyscraper down isn't an explosion. It's a silent shift at the right moment. He opened his contacts. Didn't have to scroll far. A familiar name lit up the screen: Travis R., Vector Core Technologies. Isaiah let his finger hover over the call button, paused, not because he was unsure, but because he needed to remind himself. He gave them a chance. They chose to lose it. He tapped call. 2 rings. Langston? Man, if you're calling me this early, something big just happened. Travis answered, half joking, half on alert, his gut clearly sensing a turning point. I just left Brockwell, Isaiah said, voice steady. Or more precisely, I was asked to leave. What? Travis froze. Wait, they asked you to leave the building? You're joking. No, Isaiah replied, eyes following droplets sliding down the coffee glass at the next table. The receptionist didn't check my name. She thought I was a delivery guy, told me to use the back entrance. No one verified anything. No one even asked a question. There was a thick silence on the other end. Travis finally broke it with a dry chuckle, not amused but stunned. So they just kicked out the only person who could take them into the next decade. Brilliant! Isaiah didn't reply. Travis understood. You're serious, aren't you? I am, Isaiah said. If Vector Core is willing to keep everything as outlined in the original draft, we'll sign. I confirm, no changes. All of it stays, Travis said firmly, without hesitation. I've had the same contract you sent Brockwell. My lawyers cleared it a month ago. I don't need to change a word. Isaiah nodded, though Travis couldn't see it. Then consider the $47 million deal. Reassigned. Travis exhaled hard. Isaiah, I don't even know how to thank you, and I promise, you won't regret this. Isaiah gave a small smile. No celebration, no thrill, just affirmation. Someone still knew how to listen. I didn't choose Vector Core because you were second. I chose you because you understand something. Value isn't worn. It's carried. Travis fell silent, then nodded into the phone. We'll sign this week. When would you like? Send the PDF to my lawyer by end of day. I'll sign within 24 hours. Done, Travis said. Isaiah, thank you for your trust. Isaiah ended the call. No more words. He set the phone on the table. Everything that needed to be said was. No promises, no noise. He stood, opened his briefcase, and took out one donut, still untouched, the one he hadn't intended for anyone yet. He placed it gently on the metal chair beside him and walked away. On his way to the train station, his phone buzzed twice more. One from his lawyer. Transfer of contract request received. Will send to Vector Core this afternoon. The other from EtherSync's CTO. Team received directive. API configurations with Brockwell terminated. Awaiting Vector Core deployment. 12 minutes. That's all it took to turn everything. Isaiah never looked back at Brockwell's building. Not once. He didn't need to witness the fallout to know it was coming. He had seen it before, not in million-dollar boardrooms, but in the everyday lives of regular people. One careless rejection, one wrong assumption. One time someone guessed without asking, and just like that, everything falls like dominoes. On the 29th floor, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking Denver's financial district, 12 leather chairs sat neatly around a sleek oval table. A jug of ice water infused with cucumber sat untouched in the center. Every laptop was open. A projector displayed optimistic graphs titled, The EtherSync Brockwell Future. And one chair, at the head, remained empty. He's still not here? Asked the CFO, a hint of irritation in his voice. Could be traffic, a junior assistant replied quickly. Denver's slow this morning. Jordan Rivera, the only woman in the room wearing a charcoal blazer, hair pulled back, eyes razor sharp, checked her watch. 9:27. Isaiah Langston was obsessively punctual. Not once in 7 months had he been late to a single meeting. Not a single email unanswered in more than 2 hours. This silence was not normal. Call reception, Jordan said. Ask if anyone from EtherSync has arrived. A young intern dashed out. The room fell into a tense quiet. Phones began to light up. Emails, Slack messages, texts. Nothing from Isaiah or his team. 7 minutes later, the intern returned, flushed and breathless from running. Reception said, someone did arrive around 9, a black man, but Ashley thought he was a delivery guy. Told him to go round back. The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. She turned away Isaiah Langston? One executive blurted out. Jordan stood. Exactly. And if he walked out without a word, then it's already over. One of the finance partners reached for his phone. I'll call him directly. Don't, Jordan cut in, eyes still fixed on the dark projector screen. He won't answer. He doesn't have to. Because this wasn't an accident. It was a decision. The silence now wasn't a pause. It was a void. The kind no one wants to name. A senior director muttered, "Maybe he's just testing us. A reaction check or something." Jordan turned, her gaze sharp as a blade. "You think someone like Isaiah Langston needs to test anyone? He's not a man who seeks approval. He's a man who knows his value." A mid-level manager timidly asked, "Should we send an apology?" "Invite him back." Jordan shook her head. "Too late. If he's gone quiet, then that silence is your answer." And just then, the first email landed in the inboxes of the entire executive board. Vector Core Technologies and EtherSync announced strategic partnership. Now they knew. Now they understood. But there was nothing left to save. From the 29th floor of the Brockwell building, afternoon sunlight streamed through thick glass, casting faint shadows of people pretending to be calm onto the pristine white wall behind them. But none of them were truly calm. They had just realized they lost Isaiah Langston, and no one knew if what they lost could even be measured in numbers. Jordan Rivera still sat at the head of the table, the seat they had reserved that morning for Isaiah. She maintained a composed exterior, but inside her veins felt like they were tightening. The $47 million contract she had fought through internal opposition to get approved was now just blank paper. No one needed to say it out loud. Everyone knew it was over. At that moment, another email came through, this one from a longtime client in Northern California. Short and sharp, in the style of seasoned professionals who know how to be polite without leaving any room for doubt. "We would like to cancel our recurring coordination agreement due to internal reasons. Our technical team will also begin removing all integrations with EtherSync via Brockwell. Thank you for your support thus far." Jordan didn't need to finish reading it. She closed her laptop. Others in the room began whispering. Some frowned. Some began opening their devices to check responses from other client accounts. Outside, the intern was still printing copies of a newly published article from Business Midwest. A CEO unrecognized. A company that no longer recognizes itself. Clips from the lobby security camera, showing Isaiah placing the donut box on the counter and quietly walking away, had now gone viral across LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit. One user wrote, "He didn't yell, didn't slap anyone, he just walked away," and the empire trembled. Ashley was no longer at the front desk. No one said she'd been fired, but her desk had been replaced with a temporary white one, holding only a worn plastic nameplate, now empty. A new girl sat there quietly. She always looked up when people entered. She never glanced at her phone while others spoke. The change wasn't in staffing, it was in the air. Every person passing through the hallway now paused when they crossed paths. Everything suddenly became softer, as if everyone feared being the next drop that would spill the already full glass. The communications department was ordered to draft an official response within 12 hours. But when the draft reached the board, a senior partner crossed out half the statements. "Do not use the word misunderstanding. Don't call it an unfortunate incident. This wasn't a system failure. This was culture." The only line that survived read, "We commit to restructuring our reception process and realigning internal values around human dignity." But no one in the room believed it would be enough, because what was lost wasn't just a contract. It was a chance to stand beside an icon, and they had turned it down in the same way the world had always turned him down. Within 48 hours, 3 major clients issued formal withdrawal notices. A silent investor pulled future funding. New York Business Weekly called it the first moral collapse in commercial history to be live-streamed through social media. Everyone had a take. Everyone had a story. Some recalled being treated like Isaiah in interviews. Some said they once pitched ideas at companies, only to be laughed at for being off-key. And now they all saw themselves in the old coat Isaiah wore that morning. Isaiah still said nothing. No status updates. No video. No interviews. But his silence spoke louder than any apology. In Phoenix, the EtherSync office operated normally. Isaiah showed up early, as always. He said nothing during Monday's team huddle. He just sent out one short email to the entire staff. Thank you for staying the course. Let the product speak for us. He still sat in the same room as everyone else. No private office, no assistant hovering nearby. A young employee asked him, "Aren't you angry about what they did to you?" Isaiah smiled. Not smugly, not bitterly. Number, because they didn't do that to me. They do it to anyone who doesn't look like the mold they're expecting. I just happened to be the one this time they couldn't erase. The room fell silent, not because of shock, but because everyone there had felt that same dismissal before. And now one of them had come back, not to slam the table, but to flip the entire board. Jordan Rivera was the only person at Brockwell who had the courage to write Isaiah a personal email. She didn't apologize. She didn't beg. She just wrote, "I saw you walk away that morning, and from now on I will never underestimate the silence of a person again." Isaiah didn't reply, but he saved the email. Didn't delete it, didn't even mark it as read, just left it there, like a note, a reminder that even when windows slam shut, sometimes someone will still pull back the curtain. The media storm kept rising. Analysts began calling Isaiah the quiet force. A talk show aired a segment. Do companies need to rethink how they measure talent? A university in Austin announced a scholarship named Langston for students undervalued in traditional admissions. And all because one man chose not to react. He didn't grab the spotlight. He didn't shout for justice. He simply walked out, with his value intact, leaving behind a room that never saw him coming. The news of Isaiah Langston's quiet withdrawal continued to ripple outward like waves on water, each pulse creating a new ring, each reach revealing the truth to those who once believed that silence equaled weakness. For 10 straight days, the name Isaiah Langston appeared across business columns, tech journals, leadership blogs, and sociology editorials. But he didn't respond to a single one. A CNN reporter left 12 voicemails. A Los Angeles filmmaker pitched a documentary. NPR requested him for a feature episode titled, "When Silence Becomes the Loudest Force in a Noisy World." None received a reply. Isaiah continued showing up at EtherSync like always, still made coffee with the small machine, still rolled his bicycle out of the parking garage at 6 p.m. sharp. To him, all that buzz outside was just external noise. The only thing that mattered was staying true to the path he started. But the world couldn't ignore him. A New York morning show reconstructed his story based on eyewitness accounts. From the moment Isaiah entered Brockwell with the donut box to when he was politely escorted out of the lobby without a single person meeting his eyes. The audience applauded as the host closed with, "He walked out, not because he lost his seat, but because they never saw it in the first place." A high school in Baltimore used Isaiah's story as the senior essay topic. One Cuban-American student wrote, "I was once told I didn't have the look to represent our class at a speech competition. Thank you, Isaiah. Now I know silence can change the whole stage." In Dallas, a young startup team hung a massive banner outside their office that read, "If they can't see your worth, build where they can't look away." Below it, an image of a dark navy coat, simple, nameless. Isaiah didn't witness these things firsthand, but others told him. A colleague sent him a link. A technician printed the article and pinned it on the break room wall. An account manager shared that requests to integrate EtherSync had spiked ever since the donut story went viral. Isaiah simply nodded. No pride, no denial. He just continued forward. For him, success didn't come from proving others wrong, but from never letting them decide when he was right. One Saturday morning, Isaiah left home early. No laptop, no office visit. He went to a community center in Glendale, where he once taught free coding classes to local high school students. The kids were older now. Some had made it to college. Others were still wrestling with SAT scores and tuition anxiety. But when they saw Isaiah walk in, the room fell completely silent. No one spoke. Then Lonnie, a girl who once received a Python programming book from him, quietly said, "They say you're a hero, but to us, you've been one since that old printer kept jamming every week." Isaiah laughed. This time a real laugh, the kind that didn't happen often. But when it did, it warmed the whole room. Meanwhile, back at Brockwell headquarters, an internal audit had begun in haste. Every employee was now required to take a course titled Equity, Values, and Unconscious Bias in Client Interactions. But everyone knew The issue wasn't a quiz. It was a habit. The habit of judging people by their packaging. A Harvard Business Review piece went viral. Rejection isn't in what we say, it's in how we look through people instead of looking at them. It was shared by hundreds of HR leaders. An online survey revealed 86% of respondents had been underestimated solely based on appearance or background. And Isaiah Langston, who had never done a talk show, never spoken at TED, never accepted a leadership award, was becoming their representative, even though he never claimed to be one. One afternoon, Jordan Rivera reread the apology email she had sent Isaiah. There was a knock on her office door. A new intern, hired in the wake of the fallout, stepped in. "I heard you were the only one who recognized him." Jordan didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, where the sunset glinted off the building across the street like polished metal. "No," she said softly. "I was the only one who admits I didn't." The intern didn't know what to say, but she understood, because it was the truth. In Phoenix, Isaiah shut his laptop at 6:02 p.m. Before heading home, he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his drawer and handed it to Avery, the young technician who once helped him fix the printer on his first day. "This is the job description for a new role. A community project. You'll manage it." Avery unfolded the page. The first line, bold and clear, "The Horizon Initiative, for those who were never recognized, but always ready to shine." Avery looked up, eyes wide. "Where did you get this name from?" Isaiah pulled on his coat and said quietly, "From the place I was once turned away, for not matching the decor." By the third week after the incident, no one at Brockwell Partners was calling what happened with Isaiah Langston a reception mishap anymore. No one dared use the phrase personal misunderstanding. The phrases that once rang out to pin blame on a single person. Ashley was unprofessional. "We need tighter visitor screening," had become hollow echoes now that they were forced to confront the truth. They hadn't just rejected a man. They had rejected a mindset, a way of life, a set of values they weren't used to accepting. During the second internal restructuring meeting, the chair, an old member of the board, spoke without reading from his printed notes for the first time. His voice was low, slightly trembling. "We weren't wrong because we turned away the wrong man. We were wrong because we're used to judging people by their walk, their watch, their name badge, and the car they park. And that habit isn't just unfair, it's dangerous." No one responded, because for the first time, everyone felt that message wasn't meant for someone else. It was meant for them. In the HR department, 42 applicant files were reevaluated within 5 days. Among them were candidates previously rejected for reasons like unfit image, poor cultural fit, or lacks influence. One former employee, who pitched an AI project 3 years ago and was turned down for lacking Ivy League credentials, was called back for a new role. When the recruiter phoned him, his first words weren't, "I accept," but, "I thought I didn't fit the company culture." This time, the person on the other end had no answer. One Wednesday afternoon in a small break room on the 16th floor, once a lively space for casual chatter, there was only the soft hum of the air filter. A longtime employee sat alone, slowly folding a newspaper with Isaiah's photo on the front. The headline, bold and unflinching, silent but made the whole system speak. She sighed, not from exhaustion, but because now she understood. Isaiah wasn't the only one ever pushed out of the lobby. He was just the one whose worth made the whole country notice. How many others had been turned away, quietly, unseen, unnamed? In a private meeting of the client accounts team, a senior account manager stood up after reporting 3 major contract terminations. He looked around and said, "I remember once Isaiah emailed asking why we ended a contract with a Black-owned firm. I brushed off the question with a vague reply. Now, I can't even bring myself to read that email again." No one responded, but no one denied it either. Something shifted in that room, not a collapse, but a recognition. We can't keep going like we used to. Jordan Rivera, back in her office, opened an email titled, "Business Trust Restoration Program, Staff Proposal." She read it line by line, not because it was long, but because it was written in a tone she'd never seen in any internal memo before. An honest voice. No buzzwords, no PR spin, just direct truth. We don't need a branding campaign. We need to relearn how to see people. She scrolled to the bottom. The sender, a 25-year-old Asian American staffer, recently hired after the resignation wave. His words had done what no policy had, stopped an aging system in its tracks. She didn't reply to the email, but she printed it, pasted it on the whiteboard in front of her desk, so that everyone who entered her office would see it. In the marketing department, someone proposed a new brand recovery campaign. They pitched a video about internal diversity, showcasing employees of various races, genders, and the new spirit of Brockwell. But the department head, who had remained silent in every previous crisis meeting, spoke up for the first time. We don't need a video. We need to ask ourselves how many people we've overlooked simply because they didn't walk in with a confident smile and Italian leather shoes. A black employee, quiet for the past year, stood up. "Thank you for saying that. That's why I've never spoken up in brainstorms." Another employee from a Middle Eastern background nodded. "Same here." The atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a meeting anymore. It was an admission, not about solutions, but about asking the real question. How many people have we turned away, who now won't return even if we ask? Across the building, in the company lobby, the screen still displayed a maintenance notice, a static message. "We are reviewing our system to serve you better." For the first time, that message wasn't just technical. Winter came early to Denver. The leaves were mostly gone, but the chill was still more of a whisper than a bite. On the 29th floor of Brockwell Partners, in the same boardroom once reserved for people on the list, no one talked about scheduling with EtherSync anymore. Not because they didn't need the platform, but because they no longer had the dignity to make the call. Isaiah Langston, once brushed off like an unread email, had now become a silent period at the end of any sentence where his name appeared. In meetings, when an assistant asked, "Which AI partner should we consider?" If someone replied, "EtherSync," no one would disagree, but no one would respond right away either. They'd glance at each other. A subtle pause, a throat cleared, a swallowed sentence. Because now saying Isaiah Langston's name was like holding up a mirror. One Friday afternoon, Jordan Rivera was grabbing a quick lunch in the pantry when a new intern, born and raised in Missouri, interning at a major firm for the first time, asked innocently, "Is Mr. Langston the guy you all used to call the donut guy?" For a moment, a spoon of soup hovered midair. A senior employee gently set down her mug of tea, looked at the intern, not angry but not amused either. "We don't call him that anymore," she said. "Now we call him by his name." The words were soft, but they marked a shift, from defensive distance to something that resembled respect. In Chicago, at a regional Midwest Tech Investor Summit, a speaker stood on stage presenting on decentralized AI data allocation, a buzzword-heavy, trend-chasing topic. When the slide listed top platforms, a hand shot up from the third row. "Why isn't EtherSync on this list?" The speaker paused. "I haven't updated this deck yet," he mumbled, then quickly moved to the next slide. During the break, the woman who asked, founder of a small logistics startup, a woman of color, chatted with a few others. Someone asked, "Do you know Mr. Langston?" She shook her head. "Number, but I've seen my name skipped in meetings because of how I wear my hair, so I think I know him." No one said a word, but everyone nodded. At a night class in business school in Philadelphia, a professor posed a case study. You're running a company looking for a new AI logistics partner. You have three options. One is highly publicized, one is cheap, one is EtherSync, the company that recently walked away from a deal due to being mistreated. The class went silent. Then a young woman said, "I'd pick EtherSync, not just for the tech, but because I want to work with people who don't need to argue to be right." In New York, a closed-door roundtable at a major finance firm explored the topic, listening in silence. The speaker pulled up an image of Isaiah setting the donut box on the Brockwell reception desk, now an iconic clip across social media. "Do you notice anything unusual about this action?" she asked. A young employee replied, "He didn't toss it. He placed it carefully, like he still believed someone deserved to receive it." The room fell quiet. No one had expected a single observation to hit deeper than the entire speech. Isaiah didn't know all of what was happening. He didn't read every article, didn't watch the talk shows, didn't speak to the press. But people still sent things to him, quietly, as if they just wanted him to know. This time people are changing, not because they were forced to, but because they're genuinely ashamed. An old friend from Isaiah's early programming classes, now a CTO at a Seattle company, emailed him. No apology, no trip down memory lane. Just one line. I'm teaching my son that truth doesn't always need to shout. It just needs to keep walking when others say, go around back. Isaiah didn't respond, but he saved the email, printed it, folded it, tucked it into a notebook he carried every day. In that same notebook were Jordan Rivera's email, a handwritten note from a school kid that said, I don't want to be a CEO. I just don't want to be kicked out of the lobby. And a quote Isaiah had written himself years ago, never shared with anyone. Presence doesn't need to knock. But if the door doesn't open, it still doesn't turn back. At EtherSync, one employee asked Isaiah while pouring coffee, do you ever get angry that people only started listening now? Isaiah smiled. I'm not angry. I just want them to listen. Not because they're afraid, but because finally they see themselves in the silence. He handed the employee the coffee, then walked away. Quietly, as always. But this time, the ones who stayed behind didn't dismiss the silence. They began learning to be silent with him. And that was the first real step toward respect. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt overlooked or found power in staying quiet when others expected you to explain yourself, then don't let this be the end. Click like to help more people see that dignity doesn't always shout. Hit subscribe to follow more stories where respect is reclaimed, not with volume, but with value. And if you've ever been the person the room didn't notice, share your story. Because one voice, quiet as it may be, can still change the way the world listens. There was no public apology, no press conference. But one by one, they came. The people who had once brushed past Isaiah Langston, the ones who nodded along as he was escorted from the lobby, the ones who ignored his emails because there wasn't a prestigious logo in his signature. They were beginning to seek him out, not to revive contracts, but to face the silence they had once dismissed. The first was Alan Brewster, former chief financial officer of Brockwell, a man who once wrote in a board meeting note, Langston must be thoroughly background checked. We can't let sentiment override logic. He no longer worked at Brockwell. He had stepped down after an internal investigation into partner screening practices based on non-transparent criteria. But he didn't call Isaiah to apologize. He simply sent an email, just 9 lines long, most of it blank. One line stood out, bold. If you ever need someone to coordinate financials for a community project, I'm available. Isaiah didn't reply, but he forwarded the email to Avery, the young man now running the Horizon Initiative. In the note, he wrote only, if you think it's a fit. A week later, Alan received an invitation to attend Horizon's first project meeting as an observer. Somewhere else, Ashley, the former front desk receptionist, was now working part-time at a small interior design studio in Boulder. She was no longer the girl with the smug smirk. Her hair was cropped short, no more acrylic nails, no more brunch selfies on Instagram. But for the first time in years, she was learning to read people's expressions, learning to listen before she spoke, learning to ask questions without assumption. One evening, Ashley found a secondary EtherSync email account, not the general inbox, but a technician's contact. She didn't ask for a job. She didn't apologize. She just sent this. I used to think I wasn't important enough to hurt anyone. Now I know a glance, a sentence, can make someone decide never to return again. The email was forwarded to Isaiah. He read it, did not reply. But the next week, a photo appeared on the community room wall at Horizon. A photo of Isaiah walking out of Brockwell's building, the glass doors behind him reflecting the lobby guard, the only person who looked up as he left. Ashley saw the photo and cried. Not because he had forgiven her, but because he hadn't needed to, for her to change. At an internal logistics conference in Dallas, Simone Barkley, former lead negotiator at Brockwell, made her first public appearance since the incident. She didn't sit front and center, didn't wear a luxury blazer, no slideshow, no spotlight. She simply came, sat in the back row, and listened. When the moderator asked if anyone in the audience had ever misjudged someone, she raised her hand. She stood up, speaking slowly, as if every word was cutting into her. There was a time I didn't stand when a man walked in, because I didn't think he belonged at the head of the table. Now I know. It was the table that didn't belong to people who think like I did then. Applause, not loud, not performative, just grateful. It wasn't just those directly involved, even the bystanders, the ones who stayed quiet, who once thought, it's not my place. They too had begun to look inward. A journalist who wrote the very first article about the incident, headlined CEO denied entry for not wearing a name badge, published a follow-up. Title, We waited for a retort, but Isaiah chose silence and forced us to speak. In the piece he confessed, Isaiah's refusal to react had stripped the media of its usual clickbait formula. There was no scandal, no quote, just a man who walked away and left behind a silence too vast for headlines to cover. At Horizon, people came and went. Some volunteered for a week, then left. Some came just to give back, but some came because they saw themselves in the story. Not as Isaiah, but as the one who had once looked away. One day, as Isaiah checked in on the progress of a community build, a middle-aged woman greeted him. She held a notebook. No logo. She looked him in the eye, not hesitantly, not apologetically. I used to be a communications assistant at Brockwell, she said, but now I'm learning not to use words to justify, only to listen. Isaiah smiled. He didn't ask her name. He just said, keep that notebook. Write down the things no one ever said, but always needed to be written. At Ether Sync, everything continued as usual. But in the shared office library, a new shelf had been added. Its carved wooden label read, for those who were once unseen. Anyone could place something there. An unsent apology, a dismissed memory, a draft of a letter never written. Each week, one entry was chosen at random, read aloud, no names, no attributions, just read. And then, silence. And perhaps that, those small, quiet things, are how a society truly begins to learn respect. Not through microphones, but through eye contact. Not through statements, but by sitting with one another, in silence. It was a winter morning in Phoenix, the city still cloaked in a faint mist. At EtherSync headquarters, the golden desk lamp in the corner lit up first, as usual. Isaiah Langston was already there, a cup of unsweetened black tea by his side, a folder on the upcoming AI initiative, and his old leather briefcase placed neatly next to it. There was no major event, no press conference, no live stream. Yet just a few blocks away at the Southwest Technology Convention Center, more than 600 people rose to their feet in applause, not because someone had just delivered a speech, but because a 43-second video had just played. The clip showed Isaiah quietly walking out of the Brockwell building. No message, no statement. But now the entire hall understood. That moment had left behind a new benchmark for how a person can walk through a noisy world without losing themselves. One speaker, a female CEO of a software firm that once passed on EtherSync, took the stage and said bluntly, "We used to believe that voice was the weapon. Now I know. Sometimes silence is what makes everyone hear the loudest." And something began to shift, not in a single day, but slowly. Major companies began reevaluating how they assess people. Hiring boards stopped asking, "Where did you go to school?" and started asking, "Have you ever had someone not believe in your work?" Culture fit rubrics were removed from many platforms. Group interviews began, including longer pauses, allowing quieter voices to be heard. Harvard Business Review published a piece titled, "The Langston Effect: The Power of Non-Response." When one man chooses not to react, society is forced to reflect. Time magazine featured a photo of Isaiah, not at a podium, not leading a meeting, but tying his shoes outside Horizon's community center. The caption read, "He made people talk by never trying to speak louder." Back in Denver, Brockwell Partners had rebranded to Grove and Hartwell, not to erase their history, but to signal a new structure. Still, no one in the industry used the new name. People continued to refer to them as the company that turned away Isaiah Langston, not to shame them, but to remember a lesson. In a staff meeting at Grove and Hartwell, a new employee asked, "Why haven't we reached out to EtherSync?" Someone else responded quietly, "Because reaching out now would look like we're seeking redemption, and he doesn't trade in forgiveness." No one laughed, everyone nodded. They understood. They didn't need to be forgiven. They just needed to live better so they'd never again lose someone like him. At a logistics startup in Boston, during a candidate interview, a woman with curly hair and a calm voice was asked, "Who's your professional role model?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Isaiah Langston." The interviewer asked, "Because he's brilliant?" She shook her head. Number because he didn't retaliate when the world waited for him to speak, and that's how the world learned to listen. At Princeton, a group of students founded the Code Initiative, a club to find and share stories of people rejected, not for lack of talent, but for not fitting a mold. They wrote to Horizon. Isaiah didn't reply. But weeks later, one of them received a small package. Inside was a blank notebook. On the first page, embossed in silver foil, "Don't write what others want to hear. Write what they've never dared to listen to." No signature, but everyone knew who had sent it. At Horizon, operations continued as always. No noise, no major sponsors, no ribbon cuttings. But in small communities across the country, those who had once been forgotten were reconnecting. Janitors, doormen, people who had once been left out of meetings because they didn't speak the right way, now being trained, included, and placed in roles no one ever considered them for. One day during a routine site visit, a young man, formerly a janitor in a government building, stood up and said, "I used to believe no one needed me, because no one ever looked at me twice. But your story, it helped me learn to see myself, even if it was only in a reflection." Isaiah didn't speak. He just looked at the young man, then stepped forward and handed him a key. It was the key to the resource room, the space he would now manage during Silence Week, the power without a name. No applause, no certificate, but everyone in the room stood. Because sometimes that alone is enough to remind someone they're no longer invisible. Not everyone understands Isaiah, but no one is untouched by his silence, not by force, but by introspection. People have begun to ask themselves, have I ever been the one on the other side of the table? The one who didn't bother reading someone's name because I didn't believe they could be who I was waiting for? And when that question is asked honestly, it leads to action. No company culture statements, no hashtag movements, but thousands of people, from students and teachers to CEOs and lobby guards, are behaving differently. And none of them were told to. They simply saw one man walk away, peacefully. Spring returned early in Phoenix. Cacti scattered across the courtyard of the Horizon Center had begun blooming with tiny flowers, not radiant, not loud, but enough to make those accustomed to overlooking what seemed barren stop and realize, sometimes what appears driest is the first to blossom, if someone looks closely enough. Isaiah Langston walked through the courtyard on a Tuesday morning. No laptop, no briefcase, just a notebook, a cup of tea, and a folded work schedule tucked into his jacket pocket. He wasn't there to work. This was the first day of a brand new program, but he wasn't the one opening it. That role belonged to Jordan Rivera, the woman who once sat at the head of the table in Brockwell's boardroom, the one who had watched everything unravel from a single dismissive glance. Now she stood on a small stage in an open learning hall at Horizon. In front of her sat more than 40 participants, former receptionists, postal workers, college dropouts who were told they didn't belong, and even a former recruiter who had rejected over 200 applications because she didn't sense personality. Jordan spoke slowly, each word deliberate, like she didn't want to drop a single truth. I used to think change required a campaign, a revolution, a PR storm, but it turns out it starts with one person who doesn't turn away, even when the whole room already has. No one said a word, but everyone was watching, not Jordan, but a chair behind her. Isaiah sat there quietly as always, but this time, no one ignored his presence. At a community college in New Mexico, a communications class held a session titled, "Who's the person you once failed to listen to, and why?" A white student with blonde hair said, "I used to be scared of quiet people. I didn't understand them. I felt left out when they didn't react the way I expected. But then I watched the clip of Mr. Langston walking out of that building without turning back, and I realized I've never been that strong in silence. The professor nodded. No need for extended debate. Some stories don't need dissection. They just need time to settle. In a Boston office, the new quarterly KPI sheet included an unusual final line for team leaders. Soft KPI. Listen to at least one person without decision-making power and take action based on their suggestion. No one expected that line to be taken seriously, but then a maintenance worker emailed a systems improvement idea, and within 48 hours, he was invited to present it to the CTO. No camera, no name tag. But when he walked into the meeting room, everyone stood up, not because of who he was, but because they had once failed to stand for someone who deserved it. At Horizon, a new initiative called Echo Room launched, a small space where each person could sit alone and record a story of when they felt overlooked. No responses, no feedback, just listening. Once a month, one story was selected and read aloud at the community gathering. Isaiah never read the stories. He just sat in the last row, eyes forward, hands resting gently on his knees, heart open, not for someone to enter, but for what had long been trapped to finally leave. One evening, a boy named Malik, the son of a former employee who was once fired for not integrating, stepped up and read, "I don't remember my dad's face in many pictures. He avoided cameras. But the other day, I saw that photo of Mr. Langston walking away from that company, and I thought, that's what my dad would have looked like if he didn't have to keep his head down." Everyone stood up, not to clap, but because they simply couldn't remain seated anymore. Knowing someone had just been lifted through nothing more than an image without words. At the EtherSync office, a handwritten note appeared on the public bulletin board. "Thank you for not resisting. Thank you for not rallying. Thank you for making us walk forward on our own instead of dragging us there. You didn't change the industry. You changed the way the industry faces itself." There was no name below it, but everyone recognized the handwriting. It belonged to someone who had once asked to be removed from EtherSync's partner list during Isaiah's first month as CEO. Isaiah saw the note at the end of the day. He didn't take it down. He didn't respond. He simply picked up a pencil and wrote one line beneath it. "I don't need to be thanked. Just keep walking toward a world where no one gets passed over." 1 year after the incident, Brockwell, now Grove and Hartwell, invited Horizon to host an open discussion at their headquarters. Not for collaboration, not for publicity, just because they wanted to learn how to do the right thing, even if late. Isaiah didn't attend. He sent someone else in his place. In a letter to the organizers, he wrote, "I'm not coming to prove anything. I don't need to witness change. I only need to know that when someone walks into your next lobby, someone will look up and ask, 'How can I help you?' without needing to know who they are." The discussion went on. No central figure, but everyone felt they were standing before something larger than reputation, larger than an event, larger even than an apology. And as the afternoon sun dipped lower, a new hand-painted line appeared on the wall outside the Horizon Center. "Respect isn't granted by status. It's practiced by how we see others." No signature, because this time, there was no campaign, just someone who had once refused to turn away. You can forget a CEO's name. You might not remember a speech, but you'll never forget how it felt to be misjudged, or how it felt to realize you once overlooked someone you should have stopped to hear. The story of Isaiah Langston didn't just collapse a company, it made a generation reconsider that success doesn't always belong to the loudest voice in the room. That fairness isn't a given, and that respect sometimes starts with simply not turning your back. If this story made you feel anger for those overlooked, warmth when justice was restored without shouting, or if you saw even a part of yourself reflected in it, then don't let it end here. Click like to share this story with more people. Subscribe to follow us as we continue telling the journeys where kindness always finds a voice. And if you have a story like this, don't hesitate to share it, because maybe you're the one the world once failed to see.